I don't think we can understate how good Michael Penix is and can be. This guy can really, really squeeze the football into tight windows. And Washington's receiver with the receivers, with Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, Jeremy Bernard, Giles Jackson. These guys can make plays. They can block. They're outstanding. And Odunze is probably a top 10 pick. Some people think he's as good as Marvin Harrison. And Gator, you pointed out the intriguing matchups earlier in the show in this game. Michigan's secondary is really, really good. And they will be matching up with this group of wide receivers. And when the brackets came out, I said, boy, the matchup that I think would fascinate me the most is Michigan's secondary against Washington's wide receivers, because I think it's strength on strength. And then I'm like, but Michigan's defensive line is what it is. And they only have one starter on the field for the last play of the game because they're deep. And Washington's offensive line won the Joe Moore Award. Right? You got this quarterback that can throw a football through a keyhole. You've got defensively, they might have some issues. And Michigan's, I don't know that they want to get into a shootout, but I think they're capable if they do. I would suspect they prefer a low-scoring game because that means they're doing the job on Penix. But if Penix is having a day, they're awfully tough to beat.
Yeah, that offense can put points up in bunches. And Penix, it doesn't just do it with his arm. I mean, he showed it against Texas. He still has wheels. And he can get it done there, too. Now, the running back getting hurt late in the game, we'll see how debilitating that is, how severe the injury is, if he's going to play or not.
They say he's going to, but that doesn't mean he's going to.
Yeah. I mean, that could be a real bummer for the Huskies. But like we said, this is just Big Ten strong, man. Washington and Michigan. This is a really nice matchup. I think they got this. The four teams, I think it was unfortunate what happened to Florida State, that they weren't given the opportunity. But obviously an Alabama team that's healthy is better than a Florida State team going with their second or third string quarterback, even though I don't like that process of how they did it. They didn't give me a chance. Florida State, then everybody opted out and they didn't even show up against Georgia. But I was of the opinion that Washington should have been number one seed going into this whole thing, and Michigan would have been number two, just based on the schedule. But in the end, what you want is the 1 versus 2. This is what we got. I think this is going to be great. The Michigan's defense looked so good against Alabama. Now, Alabama's offense isn't, earth-shatteringly great, and this has been a struggle for them this year. Nonetheless, Michigan steps up. You got this dynamic quarterback who can make plays with his feet as well as anybody else in the country, and Michigan held him in check and really kind of played with him. And just watching the game go on and watching the different formations that Michigan matched up with, you didn't know where the blitz was coming from. They did the same thing on offense. They've got some really good coaches, some really good schemes going. And to see them match that up with Kalen DeBoer, who has Big Ten roots through his time that he spent in the Big Ten, obviously with Indiana and all that, and Penix as well. This is going to be a great matchup. Those receivers that Washington has, Michigan's defensive backs. You mentioned the line on the offense and defense are going at it. I expect this one to be kind of like what the Texas-Washington game was. I think you're going to see a lot of points scored and some really good defensive play made when you need a defensive play made.
Well, here's an early X factor that if things hold the way they've been all year, Michigan commits the fewest penalties per game of any team in the country. 2.86 penalties per game. Only one team in the country has committed more penalties than Washington. They are the second most penalized team in terms of total number of flags in the country. Now, it felt like they were the more disciplined of the two teams against Texas, who had a flurry of penalties early in the game. But the reality is, and there was a critical one committed by Washington late, but the reality is that could be an X factor in this game if things hold the form, but they don't always do that. And we'll see what happens on the biggest stage. Well, more with that as the week goes on. 248-539-9797.